I rise this afternoon, Madam Speaker, to close the debate on the appropriation bill for the 2021-22 financial year. This is the 59th budget debate, Madam Speaker, in Jamaica's independent history. And though it takes place in the impossible context of the worst economic crisis in our history and the worst health crisis in our country, it has been no less spirited or vigorous. For that, on behalf of the people of Jamaica, I thank the contributors to the debate, the Most Honourable Prime Minister for delivering a presentation of substance, of achievement, of hope. I thank the Leader of the Opposition for his maiden presentation in that position. He tried to throw a few googlies, but he dropped them just short. I also thank Opposition spokesman on finance. No, they're going to be hit. Don't worry. For his first budget presentation, a keen cricketer in his time, he came hustling down the pitch with fast bowling action, but sadly pitched the ball wide of the Austin. Thanks to the Speaker, who has been doing an excellent job in maintaining the order of these proceedings, and thanks to the thanks to the parliamentary staff, the clerk and the deputy clerk, the marshals, the stenographers, and all who work at the House of Parliament for your dedication and professionalism. Thanks to the Financial Secretary and the entire staff at the Ministry of Finance, who are among the finest in this region, and indeed among the finest anywhere in the world. Thanks also to my security detail and driver, and of course I again express thanks to my family, my wife, my children, my parent, my mom, my brothers and sisters for their love and support. Madam Speaker, thanks too to the members of the media and the listening public for tuning in. For those in the diaspora and those following on social media, on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter, thank you for your participation and interest. Madam Speaker, the health crisis continues to evolve. Economic recovery, which we are programming to begin in the upcoming fiscal year, depends on winning the battle against COVID-19 in the public health theatre of this war. The measures announced by the Most Honourable Prime Minister Andrew Holness on Sunday are designed to control the spread of the coronavirus by restricting movement. He warned that it was coming, and the government was left with little choice. The progress of the vaccination program will also be critical, and the evolving nature of the coronavirus public health dynamics could have an impact on budgetary outcomes. Uncertainties exist, as I said in my opening presentation, and yesterday's announcement, or Sunday's announcement, was a fulfillment of that reality. In light of the programmed triple weekend lockdown, the Government of Jamaica will provide support in aggregate equivalent to $2 million per constituency, but meaning that will have to take account of local government as well. Right? Sometimes with the unknowns, constituencies, councils say, hey, what about me? So a total of $126 million through representatives to assist citizens during these weekends of lockdown. The provision will be disbursed through the CDF on the 1st of April. We'll have to work on the operational dynamics, because I know people may need to move before, but given where we are at this point of the fiscal year, drawing warrants for that is not practical. But this is the policy intent, that funds will be made available to ease the burden that citizens face, the most vulnerable of citizens, over those lockdown weekends. Madam Speaker, we have presented a budget that's aligned with the priorities of vaccination of the population against the COVID-19 and winning the battle against the virus, the priority of economic recovery, stronger and faster than before, social support for the vulnerable and those impacted by the pandemic, and continued financing of the provision of public goods and services on which our society and economy depend. And fifthly, the preservation of stability, which is a prerequisite of all other priorities. Madam Speaker, the budget has benefited from good policy, literally and figuratively. And Madam Speaker, policy matters, and good policy matters even more. Madam Speaker, Jamaica's democracy is alive and well, and even in the midst of the unprecedented, unpredictable and dangerous crisis, our democracy still works and functions. It is an amazing inheritance we enjoy, and we should do all that we can to nourish and further entrench it so that we can bequeath to future generations an even more robust and vibrant democracy than we ourselves have experienced. The fiscal plans and programs for the upcoming fiscal year were laid in the House, and we have had the freedom to express points of view on these plans. We have had the freedom to agree, to disagree, to debate, and to rebut. And the public has that freedom too. And that media has that freedom. We all do. These freedoms are sources of strength for our young nation. And we must always remember that freedom is a value in itself and not merely a means to achieve other values. It is worth noting that the literature suggests that freedom is not the natural state of mankind. And for this, I rely on the prodigious scholarship of Professor Orlando Patterson, one of the world's foremost experts on freedom. Domination is what has come natural to humankind throughout the long course of human history. The political architecture of the world since World War II has moved steadily towards a rule-based international order, replacing the principle of might is right, of course with setbacks from time to time. And we here in Jamaica have constructed an independent political Jamaican state based on the principles that include freedom as an inalienable right. However, political independence does not by itself allow for a maximization of freedom, neither at the level of the state nor at the level of the individual. The maximization of freedom for the individual and the state depends materially on the attainment of economic independence. And this is why economic independence is a founding pillar of economic policy in the Andrew Holness administration. Madam Speaker, it is self-evident that freedom, liberty, and the sustenance of our democracy also critically depend on the availability of accurate information and data. In more autocratic political regimes where decision-making is centralized and dependent on a few people, then what is important is that those decision-makers have accurate information. The population needs it less, as many decisions are made from them, made for them. In democratic regimes, however, the citizen is at the center of decision-making. They put leaders in place. They effectively choose the policy direction of the country. And furthermore, in democratic regimes with liberal market-based structures, everyday decisions by free economic agents aggregate to influence the progression of the economy. And it is therefore of fundamental importance that citizens have access to and are presented with accurate and reliable data because their decisions affect everyone's life. Madam Speaker, there's nothing more empowering of the citizen than his or her possession of accurate information, of knowledge, and of understanding. It is said that knowledge is power, Madam Speaker, and I firmly agree. We must therefore commit ourselves to true empowerment of the people, and not just mere words and platitudes, by always promoting the increase in knowledge and understanding of the people, in addition to fostering public discourse based on a healthy respect for data, facts, logic, reason, and the methods of scientific inquiry to which we owe much of our material progress. Madam Speaker, in the interest of the public discourse based on facts and accurate data, I propose to address certain inaccuracies and false assertions propagated by the opposition. Madam Speaker, much of the opposition spokesman's thesis was grounded in the provably inaccurate and factually wrong claims that Jamaica's fiscal spend to the COVID-19 pandemic. Madam Speaker, I have to begin by saying that the original error was with the publisher of the report which he referenced, the Inter-American Development Bank. But as I go through what the report mistakenly contained, I invite you to make your own mind up as to whether the opposition should have picked this up themselves or himself as he read the page that summarized Jamaica's fiscal response to the pandemic, particularly considering all of the supplementary budgets and the statements in this House and the information in the public domain. The table in the report that the opposition spokesman quoted referenced Jamaica's fiscal position for the health sector response as not applicable, i.e., they put $0 down for Jamaica's health response, while listing the medical expenditures such as PPE borne by other countries. Can you imagine an error of that nature? But, I mean, in my view, alarm bells should have gone off. It certainly went off when I looked at it. Because it's general knowledge, Madam Speaker, that Jamaica allocated billions of dollars for the health sector response across the last supplementary budget of 2019-20 and 3 supplementary budgets in 2020-21. Yet the opposition spokesman used a report that underestimated Jamaica's health response by at least 8 billion Jamaican dollars. Now, in fairness, the opposition spokesman did not compare health expenditures. However, the growth omission of Jamaica's health expenditure in the same table he referenced should have exposed the possibility that the table may have had other omissions and errors. And indeed, it had. It's general knowledge, I should ask, Madam Speaker. Isn't it general knowledge in Jamaica that the compassionate grant was paid out to closely 400,000 Jamaicans? Didn't everyone see the lines on television and on social media? Wasn't I criticized? We reported here in the Parliament. Yet the opposition spokesman used figures that, in an obvious error, stated the compassionate grant at $150 million and not $4 billion. Now, again, the original error was with the IDB who published the report. But I contend, or I ask you whether you think he should have picked that up. Madam Speaker, isn't it general knowledge that the $1.2 billion back-to-school grant was provided to PATH households? That's on top of the PATH $1.1 billion extra grant. Everybody remember that $1.2 billion back-to-school grant in August of last year? The opposition spokesman used a table from a report that, in another obvious error, failed to include the PATH back-to-school grant. Madam Speaker, the opposition spokesman also used a report that underestimated the amount of farmers. We know that it was $1 billion. He used a report that had it at 200 million. That's in the report. Big error. Madam Speaker, after all that we have debated about money provided for computer through PATH and non-PATH, with them saying it's not enough, the report excluded the $1.85 billion that the government provided for PATH and non-PATH households for computers. Madam Speaker, shall I go on? The table, Madam Speaker, that the opposition spokesman used to compare our fiscal response, right, underestimated the set cash and the best cash, the flagship program for unemployed, by $3 billion. No, Madam Speaker, again, he used a report from the IDB. But I contend with all the attention, I come here and report on it, a bell should have gone off. I don't want to list all of them, but the money to the CDF, the 189 million is not there. The money to the municipalities, the money for the disabled, those funds are not there. Okay? Now, Madam Speaker, the list of omissions goes on and on. And the report, I will admit, overestimated one component. The net effect, however, was a gross underreporting of Jamaica's fiscal response to the pandemic, which was very unfortunate. And it's unfortunate the IDB did not consult with the Minister of Finance either. So, Madam Speaker, these fiscal outlays were approved in this Parliament and reported on me on several occasions. And again, the original error in the methodology was the IDB's, but the opposition spoke well. So, Madam Speaker, in using erroneous tabulation to compare us to their Caribbean neighbours, the opposition spokesperson inadvertently ended up constructing a narrative that was false. you use bad data to make a narrative, the narrative is going to be false. And it was very unfortunate. As he presented, I was extremely perplexed. I looked on the thing and said, why isn't he seeing that the information is faulty? The very next day, Madam Speaker, on Friday, March the 12th, I wrote to the Inter-American Development Bank in Washington, and to their credit, they quickly appointed a team to look into the matter, and by Monday, they acknowledged the error in a letter to me, which read in part. Here is a letter from the IDB. I have it in my speech. We received your letter from March 12, 2021. We are sorry for any inconvenience caused by the original version of our report. Thank you for the updated information that your team sent us on March 15, 2021 regarding your government's fiscal stimulus spending in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. The numbers reveal a doubling of efforts relative to the measures we reported last fall in the IDB's Caribbean Quarterly Bulletin. That was in November. A doubling. We regret the incomplete and inaccurate accounting of Jamaica's programs in the bulletin. Two specific examples are the lack of reporting for spending directed at the health response and the full dimension of the $8 billion and the full dimension of the compassionate grant, $4 billion versus $150 million. These augmented programs certainly are helping to alleviate the impact of the health crisis, the economic recession on Jamaican households and businesses. Madam Speaker, the table in the report from which the opposition spokesman quoted was erroneous not by 10% or by 20%, but the table that he quoted from was wrong by 100%. Now, I say in humility, and it is my job to point it out. I wish I never had to, and I called before, but I have to. You can't put that in the public domain and I not correct it. But in humility, Madam Speaker, recognizing that we are all fallible, including me, that bad data and wrong data leads to false narratives and to bad policy. Now, Madam Speaker, the opposition spokesperson compared our fiscal responses to Barbados and Bahamas and Suriname and Trinidad and put Jamaica at the bottom. Okay? Now, you have to remember, first of all, Barbados and Bahamas and Trinidad are much wealthier countries than ours. And if you are to believe the report on their numbers, then our corrected numbers in aggregate are actually higher than theirs. Right? Now, and we have much higher debt at 110%, or sorry, 94% going into the crisis. They went into the crisis much lower. Now, I want to mention one of the countries that he was, quick to point out that we were less than was our Caribbean neighbor, Suriname. But here's what the same report had to say about Suriname. It said inflation increased from the same IDB report, right? And we know this to be because we have independently verified that this is correct. Inflation increased from 4.2% in December 2019 to 40% at the end of August 2020. Suriname was downgraded to a negative outlook by Fitch, Moody's, and Standard & Poor's. This is public information. Suriname's sovereign credit rating was downgraded to selective default by Standard & Poor's, restricted default by Fitch, and CAA3 by Moody's in July 2020. But those ratings were subsequently raised by Fitch to CCC and CC respectively. The main reason for the slight upward revision was the consent from bondholders to restructure the amortization schedule for Suriname's 4-year 2023 bond. So the opposition spokesman chided the government for spending less than our CARICOM neighbor that ended up defaulting on its debt, with inflation skyrocketing from 4% to 40% in 8 months. Now, indeed, that is a choice. But that is not a choice the Jamaican people want the government to make. Madam Speaker, one-dimensional analysis cannot cut it. And one-dimensional analysis that relies on provably erroneous data. Again, I say it in humility because he relied on a report. But we're all fallible. But bad data, wrong data leads to false narratives, Madam Speaker. Now, Madam Speaker, moving on, another problem is that the opposition spokesperson compounded the error by using the faulty data on comparative fiscal spend to make other assertions. He built much of his presentation around food poverty and compared Jamaica regionally in an unfavorable way, and of course, blamed the government. Madam Speaker, I took the opportunity to read the report he quoted from, which is a standard publication of the U.S. Department of Agriculture that uses quantitative techniques to estimate levels of food poverty in 76 low and middle income countries. Now, I did not simply look at the table in the report. The report describes the methodology that the authors use to derive their results, and the methodology is always very important. The first thing to note is that the methodology is a theoretical quantitative model. It's based on numbers and formula in a proverbial spreadsheet or model. They did not go to these countries and conduct actual surveys with actual people. As Statin does, they did not come to Jamaica and measure food poverty by visiting households. What they did was to take pre-COVID-19 macro data and they incorporated per capita income, the size of GDP contraction that each country is projected to experience, levels of food prices, the impact of this on per capita income of the GDP contraction, and several other variables. And with a complex quantitative model, they use that to project theoretically, right, what food poverty is likely to be. Now, here's how they describe their methodology, which has some, they say the 2020 ISA report incorporated initial estimates of income shocks from the COVID-19 pandemic as presented in the World Economic Outlook from the IMF of April 2020 and compared them with projections from another data set, which represents the pre-pandemic scenario. In early September, that data set produced an unpublished update to their estimates, incorporating the best information available on the anticipated decline in GDP in 2020 and a recovery in 2021. The updated IMDS estimates use data from that, as well as estimated and projected values developed by ERS. Now, here's the important point. We use the newly updated GDP information from the IMDS September update to re-estimate the COVID-19 impacts on food security for 2020 and 2030 presented in the 2020 ISA report. So contrary to how the opposition spokesman used the data from the study, right, to somehow imply that because the fiscal response was low, because the care response was low, then the food poverty gain went up. Right? No, that is just not, that's not what the report says. The report is theoretical, and the report did not depend on government policy. It's a theoretical model using data and parameters, and it's not a measurement of real people anywhere. Now, the last direct measurement of poverty that was done of real people in Jamaica by Statin showed that poverty declined to the lowest levels in 12 years under the Andrew Holness government. That was a direct measurement. Now, back to the theoretical study introduced by the opposition spokesman. Am I discarding it because it's theoretical and saying that it has no value? No, not at all. It has value, but you have to use it according to what it is actually saying. To use the study to weigh the government's response to the COVID-19 pandemic is a gross misapplication of the report. But let us examine the report that the opposition spokesman has relied up so much on its thesis. Here is what the same food poverty report introduced by the opposition spokesman says, and I don't recall him highlighting these points. Just put that first graph up for me, please. Of the countries surveyed, theoretically, estimated food poverty in Jamaica is the lowest in Latin America and the Caribbean, pre-COVID-19, post-COVID-19, with the only exception of Colombia and the Dominican Republic, both of which have higher average incomes than Jamaica. If the graph would go up on the screen, well, we'll come to it when it can be put up. The other thing that the report speaks to, which was not highlighted by the opposition spokesman, is that in every region of the world, food poverty is estimated to have increased as a result of the COVID-19. Oh, that first graph. Okay, so the blue shows your per capita income. Jamaica is the third blue column. Per capita income is measured on the right axis. Okay? Damrep and Colombia are the first two blues, and they have higher per capita income. The red line is the percentage of the population projected to be in food poverty. And you'll see that there is somewhat of a, you'll see that Jamaica is the lowest, but for Colombia and Damrep, who have higher per capita income than us. And you'll see that there are countries that are wealthier than us, like Peru and Ecuador, who have higher levels of projected food poverty than us. None of that would have been mentioned by the opposition spokesman, and I wonder why. Now, in every region of the world, if we move to the other graph, food poverty is estimated to have increased. Right? So it's no, let's look at the other graph. In Asia it increased. In Latin America and Caribbean it increased. In North Africa it increased. In Sub-Saharan Africa, in all the regions surveyed, and also in Jamaica. But these points were left out. No, it's not. And when you look through the report, there is a correlation with the size of the impact and the level of the increase. It's not a perfect correlation, but there is. Latin America and Caribbean is one of the hardest hit regions, and Jamaica is one of the hardest hit countries, according to that report, as far as GDP is concerned. So, Madam Speaker, poverty is real, and the government the state government has achieved the lowest poverty outturn in 12 years, continues to focus on poverty reduction in face of the pandemic with a continued support to vulnerable populations, Madam Speaker. Now, the opposition spokesman also made claims about increases in food prices. Now, let's be clear, Madam Speaker. Inflation exists. Prices do increase. That's one of the properties of almost all economies. Our policy intent through the conduct of monetary policy by the central bank and with the role of competition is that the movement of general level of prices on an annual basis should be low single digits. And the policy has been working. Inflation has been low and stable and predictable for the past 5 years, probably 6 years. When you compare that with our history, Madam Speaker, it is a remarkable turnaround that this House, both government and opposition, can be proud of. And if we put that graph up, it's only in the last 6 years that we have consistently had inflation less than or equal to or slightly above 5% per annum. And here I'm going 30 years of inflation data, going all the way back to the 1980s. And you will see, if you examine the graph closely, that's only in the last 6 years that we have consistently had inflation on an annual basis of about 5% or less. And that's something to be proud of. And an achievement that we should not undermine. Now, inflation has a compounding effect. If you have a 4% inflation over 5 years and it's compounded, that leads to a cumulative increase of 22% when you compare year 5 with year 1. If you have inflation of 5% per year over 5 years, that leads to a cumulative increase of 28% when you compare year 5 with year 1. So if you are unemployed or on a fixed income, the cumulative impact of these historically low rates of inflation over a number of years can hurt. And it's for that reason why we're allocated increases of $700 million for government pensions this year. And it's for that reason that economic recovery is so important. However, Madam Speaker, the opposition spokesman came to the nation's parliament last week, or week before, and presented a widely circulated image of prices purportedly from 2016 and
the minister's time for speaking has expired.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move that the member's time be increased sufficiently for him to complete his presentation. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
So, Madam Speaker, I've already acknowledged that cumulative price increases, even with a 4% to 5% annual inflation, can be 22 to 28% cumulatively over 5 years. However, the price increase data for the items presented by the opposition spokesman were simply not credible, and there's no other way to say it. Madam Speaker, the opposition spokesman provided no source for his information. Look at the speech again. Notice that every other table had detailed sources. Not that one. Not that one. He expects to walk into the nation's parliament and present data to the people of Jamaica. Make the case that this data is nationally representative without telling the people where the data came from. Now, he said he got it on radio. He said he got it from a single wholesale business. Which wholesale business, Madam Speaker? Up to now, we don't know. Now, the retail wholesale trade in Jamaica is worth several $100 billion per year and consists of a multitude of individual corner shops and grocery stores and supermarkets and wholesale. What are the annual sales of this one wholesale compared to the hundreds and hundreds of $billions of the business in Jamaica? Madam Speaker, Jamaica is fortunate to have a Consumer Affairs Commission that seeks to assist consumers in Minister Shaw's ministry, that seeks to assist consumers in making informed decisions by conducting and publishing price surveys on various essential consumer goods, including basic food items. The Consumer Affairs Commission, formerly the Pricing Commission, has been doing this since 1971. That is for 50 years. The Consumer Affairs Commission, it has been updated because of the Pricing Commission before. In its current form, it takes its authority from the Consumer Protection Act passed in 2005, when the Most Honourable P.J. Patterson was Prime Minister, and it was amended in 2012, when the Most Honourable Portia Simpson Miller was Prime Minister. And Prime Minister Simpson Miller, in particular, relied heavily on the Consumer Affairs Commission. All you have to do is check the archives. You'll see it. She referred to it in her speeches, etc., etc. She used it. Yes. Today, the Consumer Affairs Commission has an annual budget of $135 million spent on only on collecting price data and publishing it. They employ 32 Jamaicans with an additional survey officer corps of 10 who visit 88 outlets across Jamaica in every single parish, every single month, every single year. The price data is captured on smartphones, and the data is signed off by the outlets and uploaded to the Consumer Affairs Commission thing. The data undergoes a data verification process whereby the outlets are contacted again to query price anomalies. Right? It's a quality assurance. The Consumer Affairs Commission performs rigorous analysis on its price data to ascertain monthly and annual average price changes, and the data is made available to consumers through a price inquiry tool on the Consumer Affairs Commission website. In addition, Consumer Affairs Commission produces a grocery consumer alert in at least one national newspaper every single month with the name of the outlet, the description of the item, the brand, etc., the size, etc. And the data is transparent. They tell you exactly where they got it from and how they got it. And a number of stakeholders, the Bank of Jamaica, Statin, unions, students, academics rely on the Consumer Affairs Commission. The question is, with this robust, transparent price data available going back many years, collected in an independent, objective and professional manner that is nationally representative, why would the opposition spokesman come to Parliament with his data gathered from one dege unnamed source? Madam Speaker, the Consumer Affairs Commission data, transparently available to anyone on its website, collected from 88 outlets, reports that the average price of mackerel moved by 34% between February 2016 and February 2021, or 6% compounded per year. That is what the Consumer Affairs information has, as opposed to what he had, and I won't even repeat it. According to the Consumer Affairs Commission, corned beef moved by between 17% and 31% over the 5 years, which is approximately 3% to 5% per year. Cooking oil by 16% to 22%, or approximately 3 or 4% per year. Rice by 36%, or approximately 7% a year. Pre-packaged dark sugar, Madam Speaker, all of those things he reported inaccurate information on.
Not even shop yogurt.
No, Madam Speaker, the one area, at least, if a man get 1 out of 15 right,
Give it to him.
we must give it to him.
Give it to him. Give it to him.
1 out of 15 is a good start. For the opposition, 1 out of 15 is an okay start, right? But, Madam Speaker, the opposition spokesman, with respect to the prices of chicken back, was more on target. The average price of chicken back, Madam Speaker, that the Consumer Affairs Commission reports was an increase of 87% over the 5 years. And the opposition, no, I'm saying the Consumer Affairs Commission. Let me just, okay? Now, let me say, Madam Speaker,
Get up and object.
that a few months ago, in December, I believe,
Stand up like you get up.
and this is has to be a legitimate concern. A few months ago, in December, I believe, Prime Minister Holness directed that the policy around the allocation of chicken back importation licenses, which has been in place across administrations, be revamped. Minister Green took some new policy proposals to Cabinet, which will be implemented effective April 1st. And the expectation is that we'll see improvements in chicken back pricing. And Minister Green, the Prime Minister, will let you know. Now, the government, at the same time, has to strike a balance, as Minister Green has shared with me, between importation and local production, and has to ensure that the small backyard chicken farmers are able to sell into the market. So during periods of high local supply, we have to balance imports. Now, the prices of chicken back on the world market increased by 15 to 20% last year. So you have to be careful about the temptation of, playing politics with that, because that's totally outside of the government's control. But the new policy for April 1st will bring normalcy and stability to the supply and demand, while ensuring that the small backyard farmers won't be left out. So, Madam Speaker, with the exception of the chicken back prices, however, the independently collected, objectively assessed, robustly validated, and transparently available data from the Consumer Affairs Commission differs radically from the subjective information. And what's more, Madam Speaker, opposition spokesman on his table, he left out the fact that the price of counter flour between 2016 and 2021, according to the Consumer Affairs Commission, which I know independently, has declined by approximately 4% over the 5 years. Decline. Now look how much Jamaicans eat dumpling. Average dumpling price is down in 2021 as compared with 2016. And him leave that out. Now, Madam Speaker, from February to February 2016 to February 2021, flour prices have declined. So, Madam Speaker, I don't doubt that someone handed the opposition spokesman the faulty information from a single wholesale, as he says. He never went and made it up, or I don't think he necessarily went himself. But, Madam Speaker, it doesn't change the fact that it is not a credible national statistic. Okay? And a lot of damage is done by holding up numbers that are not nationally representative. Madam Speaker, now, I want to point out where, because he can hide behind and say, look, my 2021 prices are okay. The error in his data is in his 2016 prices. Okay? If you use lower 2016 prices than were in fact, then you're going to overestimate the increase. And Madam Speaker, I'm going to show you the consumer alert information published by Consumer Affairs Commission in the newspapers in 2016. It has a lot of numbers to focus on. But, Madam Speaker, if you look at the prices of mackerel and cooking oil and rice and dark bulk sugar, etc., what you will see, right, and bear in mind that 2.2 pounds in a kilogram, what you see is that the opposition spokesman was far off. Take the price of mackerel that he had in his report as $55 in 2016. When you look on the Consumer Affairs Commission in the corporate area, in Clarendon, in Westmoreland, in St. James, in St. Catherine, in Hanover, in Portland, in April, May, June, July, August, September, the prices of that 155 gram of mackerel is in the region, according to the Consumer Affairs Commission, of $72, $73, $74. One place might have had it for a little less. Okay? Now, if you use a starting price of 55 instead of a starting price, the actual starting price of 70 or 75, you're going to get the wrong number. And the same is true, and I invite the public to look at it for themselves, for the starting prices of cooking oil. The opposition spokesperson had a starting price of cooking oil in 2016 that was completely off. Now, we cannot have that in a nation's parliament, Madam Speaker. Now,
Mr. Golding demands resignation. He's misleading you. He's misleading you.
I want to give you cooking oil as the last example before I move on. Right? Madam Speaker, I mean, the opposition spokesman reported cooking oil prices as going up by 159 when the actual number is 16%. We can't have that in the parliament. We can't have that. So, Madam Speaker, the opposition spokesperson's 2016 prices are just not credible. They're significantly underestimated, and his percentage increases are grossly exaggerated. Hashtag not credible. Now, if you could just make a policy like that, right, without using a national institution, then we'll just get rid of all of these state agencies, and the Minister of Finance would just go to the corner shop the weekend before the budget and just go with the budget. We don't have to measure anything formally. So, Madam Speaker, prices have increased. We know that. And we also know that the average is not everyone's experience. By definition, depending on where you shop, some will experience above average increases, and some will experience below average increases. The key is to have accurate time information that will aid decision making. So, Madam Speaker, at the first opportunity, whenever the funds become available, we will allocate additional resources to the Consumer Affairs Commission to ensure that they publish and disseminate their work as widely as possible, so that citizens will be informed and the space for the weeds of misinformation to take root will not exist. And we encourage consumers, even in a pandemic, to shop around and to look at the prices published by the Consumer Affairs Commission. Now, while I believe that the opposition spokesman may have had sincere intent, the impact, Madam Speaker, the impact of the gross and irresponsible exaggeration breeds fear. And we will not allow anyone to inadvertently plunder and prey upon the fears of the Jamaican people. And, Madam Speaker, knowledge drives away fear. Knowledge. Madam Speaker, the opposition leader made an unfortunate, misleading. Madam Speaker, he implied that the record dividends being paid by the central bank are funded by profits, the majority of which are comprised of realized and unrealized. Madam Speaker, I want to provide some facts and ask some questions. Between 1989 and 2007, yes, when the opposition was in office, there was an average annual depreciation in the value of the Jamaican dollar by 14% per year. If you could just put the graph up. Between 2012 and 2016, when they were again in office, the average annual depreciation was 9% a year. So far, between February 2016 and March 2021, the average depreciation has been 3.8%. And even if you back off the revaluation of the last 2 weeks, it would have been 4%. The lowest levels in our history, even though we are in the midst of a pandemic. Now, that's just a simple, provable fact. And knowledge is power. And the media, financial journalists, commentators, those watching on television and following on social media should be familiar with. Therefore, narrowing the opportunity for the weeds of misinformation and the thorns of whipped-up fear to thrive. So, Madam Speaker, if depreciation leads to foreign exchange gains, which in turn leads to BOJ dividends just so, I want to share with you the BOJ's foreign exchange gains of the past and ask where the dividends are paid over to the people of Jamaica. Madam Speaker, the audited financial statements of the BOJ show that between 2000 and 2007, and again between 2012 and 2016, 11 years when the opposition was in power, using Mr. Gold's analysis of just adding it all up, the Bank of Jamaica enjoyed foreign exchange dividends of approximately $728 million US. Let me say that again. Under the 11 years, $728 million US of foreign exchange dividends. Today, at today's exchange, that's $107 billion. I want to know, Madam Speaker, where are the dividends? And I'm just talking about 11 of the 18 years. I have not even touched the most devastating parts in the 1990s. Madam Speaker, as a percentage of GDP in each of those 11 years, under the opposition, the foreign exchange gains of the BOJ cumulatively amounted to 6% of GDP. What? That is the budget to educate the 500,000 students in the education system each year. I want to know, the children of Jamaica want to know, where are their dividends? $727 million US, or $107 billion of foreign exchange gains under them, Madam Speaker, and not 1 red cent of dividends. Absolutely zilch to the people of Jamaica.
Where the money there?
And when we, due to good policy, are able to fund a $60 billion SERVE program with a historic, largest ever $33 billion dividend to the people of Jamaica from the central bank, he wants to complain? Madam Speaker, they say that when you live in a glass house, do not throw stones. Madam Speaker, when you live in a glass house, do not throw stones. And Madam Speaker, it is even more evident that if you take a little golden dust and you throw on the glass house, it is still only a glass house on this issue. Madam Speaker, I'm not going to go into all of the data, right? But the fact is, the Bank of Jamaica has two sources of income, operating income and foreign exchange income. And when you look at the audited accounts for the last 20 years, foreign exchange income is 20% of overall operating income, and it's consistent over the last 20 years. There's nothing structurally that has changed in that regard. What has changed is the policies behind the approach, Madam Speaker, that allows the BOJ's operating income to be profitably earned. Right? And, Madam Speaker, for more than half of the years between 2000 and 2017, 17 years between 2000 and 2017, the BOJ lost money. More than half for 9 of the 17 years. And for the cumulative period, 2000 to 2017, the BOJ lost money. When you add up all of those 17 years, it's a net loss. So when you hear me celebrate BOJ's profitability and this record dividend, there's a reason I celebrate. I celebrate for Jamaica. I share the development in a celebratory style, in a nationalistic pride, being painfully aware of Jamaica's historical monetary data. And anyone who truly understands the monetary history of Jamaica, in particular the last 20 to 30 years, would celebrate the restoration of sustainable profitability to the BOJ and the record and historic dividends being paid out of the BOJ in a transparent way, in accordance with the Bank of Jamaica Act, in the first week of April, at a time when we need it most. I remind you, Madam Speaker, that for 40 years, or for however long, from 1976, the BOJ's capital was just 4 million, and we did many things. Now, other thing I want to mention, Madam Speaker, is that through deliberate policy action, good policy, we doubled non-borrowed reserves between 2015-16. Well, we'll talk about that another time. Let's leave it out for now. But I want to repeat what I said before, Madam Speaker, that around the world, that central banks pay dividends on an annual basis. In the Bank of England, £500 million a year in the decade between 2010 and 2019. The Canadian Central Bank, $1 billion Canadian a year of dividends from the central bank to the people every year. Australian Central Bank, $2 billion annually, with the exception of a few years. And the Federal Reserve in the United States, $75 billion a year. And what about Jamaica? Even though they, under their side, $728 million or 100 billion of foreign exchange gains were earned, no dividends were paid. Glass house, Madam Speaker, on that issue. Now, due to good policy, we had $90 billion of opening cash last year when the pandemic hit. And due to good policy, we have an additional $30 billion that will help us implement a social and economic program with vaccines of $60 billion. Policy matters, Madam Speaker, and good policy matters more. And good policy pays dividends, which improves people's lives. Now, as I mentioned before as well, Madam Speaker, we don't print US dollars in Jamaica. Every US dollar we purchased was earned by someone, it was borrowed, or it was remitted here. And for US dollars to be available, it has to be a supply. Arguing in our society about the scarce commodity, how this commodity is allocated at the level at which it has been available, has been a preoccupation of the last 40 years, and which has sometimes been unfortunate as it misses the real issue. Some countries have foreign exchange controls where the central bank effectively rations foreign exchange and tells you how much you can buy and at what price. And we rejected that long ago. However, if we don't want exchange controls and want to be able to freely buy or sell foreign exchange with minimal restrictions, then clearly, for any level of supply of US dollars, a market system is the best means of allocating those resources. And the BOJ is working hard and needs to continue to work hard to improve the transparency and functioning of the market through systems and technology. However, a subsidized system would only result in losses for the central bank and non-transparent benefit transfers towards the largest users. Later, I'll present the case of a CARICOM country that makes this point of the ruin that it ultimately causes. So, Madam Speaker, the real issue that we need to focus on, and we're better off focusing on, putting our thoughts and energies on, is how we can increase the supply of US dollars to our country, which is the real fundamental issue. And for too long, we've been skirting around it. But there's no better time than the time when our earnings, our foreign exchange earnings have dropped by $2.5 billion, the lowest levels in 30 years, for us to focus on that. Now, Madam Speaker, the opposition spokesman spoke about the gender impact of the pandemic, expressed in particular the widening of unemployment gender gap. On that score, he's correct. Madam Speaker, in my budget presentation last year, I spoke with great pride about how this government had closed the gender employment gap, where the female unemployment was 20% in 2013 and dropped to a historic low of 8.6% in October 2019. And male unemployment was 10.6% and dropped in 2013 and dropped to a historic low of 6% in October 2019. So the negative difference in female and male unemployment, which used to be 9.4%, was decimated, abolished, and smashed to only 2.6% as at October 2019, before the pandemic. Madam Speaker, pre-pandemic, employment was good under the Andrew Holness administration, but it was especially good for women. While the rest of the world was talking about increasing female labour force participation, our Jamaican women led the way. Now, Madam Speaker, because of the pandemic, 130,000 jobs were lost, and the gender makeup of this initial shock maintained the gender gap, i.e. it was still a low gender gap. What has happened, though, is that the service economy, which is hardest hit, is the slower one to recover. So we saw that by October, we had a recovery in employment, but male employment recovered faster in the October numbers than female, because female employment is disproportionately in the service sector of the economy. The good news, though, Madam Speaker, is that the gender gap at 4.4% now is still lower than it was in 2013. And the other good news is that the CARE program disproportionately benefited women. Just over 60% of the 440,000 beneficiaries of the CARE program were female, and 40% were male. Approximately 61% of the beneficiaries of the compassionate grant under the CARE program were female, and 39% were male. Approximately 59% of the monthly unemployment stipend beneficiaries, i.e. set cash beneficiaries, are female, and they continue to be female. These women will receive further temporary unemployment support under the Serve Jamaica program. Madam Speaker, we too care about gender disparities and the impact of the pandemic on females, and our policy is a tangible demonstration of that. And again, good policy matters more, and women benefit from the good policy of the Andrew Holness government. Now, Madam Speaker, it's useful to take stock of, I want to address the increased spending and why increased spending is not an option at this time. Madam Speaker, it's useful to take stock to consider what we have had to do to respond to the fiscal challenges created by the COVID-19 pandemic. It was by divine providence that prior to the pandemic, we happened to be harvesting resources to make a historic prepayment on debt. Resources from the Transfer Jamaica and Wigton privatization, resources from the reintegration of PCJ, and from deliberate and conscious overperformance of fiscal targets were to fund a historic prepayment of debt. By the time the pandemic came, we were therefore very fortunate to have an opening cash balance of $90 billion. And it was meant to create room for faster debt reduction and greater growth-related spending. And that plan was very painfully thwarted. It is a blessing that we had those resources to help cushion the impact, or we'll be in a very different position today. We were, believe it or not, the first out of the block in the region and one of the first in the world in announcing a fiscal response to the COVID pandemic. It so happened that we had a budget presentation at the same time, so that was a convenience. But as a historical fact, we announced our fiscal program first on March 10th, and we followed it up on March 24th in the closing budget presentation. You can check the data. That's far ahead of the vast majority of countries in the world, far ahead of all the countries in our region and most countries in the world. In addition, we took the step to suspend our fiscal rules and extended the date by which Jamaica's debt to GDP ratio should be reduced to 60% by 2 years. We also adjusted the automatic correction mechanism in our fiscal rules to lower the pace of the fiscal correction. The law passed in 2014 required fiscal correction over 2 years. We relaxed that requirement by doubling the time required for fiscal correction to 4 years, easing fiscal pressures. Otherwise, coming into the 21-22 fiscal year, we'd have even greater fiscal challenges. And, Madam Speaker, even with the renewal of the NHT contributions, Madam Speaker, the resources were still insufficient to fund an economic recovery program in 21-22. We harvested a one-off $33 billion dividend from the Bank of Jamaica, which will fund the $60 billion social and economic recovery with vaccine program for Jamaica, the SERVE program. Without that dividend, the fiscal challenges would have been excruciatingly more difficult. Madam Speaker, so we are fortunate to have the $90 billion last year, or this year, and the $33 billion for next year. That's approximately 6% of GDP in fiscal spending to keep the proverbial train running on time and to provide economic and social and medical support to vulnerable populations. For a country with the scale of our fiscal problems, that is a considerable achievement for all of us. Madam Speaker, in describing the component of the SERVE program, I said that instead of it being $60 billion, I wish it could have been $100 billion or $200 billion, and explained the constraints that placed a hold on that desire. Since then, the view has been expressed that we should spend more to boost growth funded by reducing the primary balance, which is the fiscal savings required to pay our interest bill. This would result in us targeting a fiscal balance lower than projected for in our legislated fiscal rules. Indeed, the opposition spokesman made such a suggestion in his presentation, arguing that it would boost growth. Madam Speaker, as I mentioned in my opening budget presentation, I have given this situation a lot of thought, and in the process, I have reviewed a lot of data and information, and I want to share my thoughts with you, the people of Jamaica. Madam Speaker, we have to make policy that suits the particular provable realities in Jamaica. Our conversation is happening against the backdrop of policy action in the United States, which no doubt has had an influence on some. Madam Speaker, the United States is very, very different from ours. It's a wealthy country, diverse economic base, very robust and quite self-sufficient. Trade is approximately 20% of GDP, and for Jamaica, trade in goods and services is approximately 80% of GDP. As a result, relative to other countries such as the United States, fiscal stimuli that incrementally boost consumption in Jamaica has much less of an impact on economic growth, unless it is targeted at the very poorest quintiles, which is what we're trying to do, where the expenditure basket has the most domestic content. When you boost outside of that group, what you're likely to get is increased savings, as happened with the first stimulus in the United States. It was so wide, it wasn't targeted, they ended up with a saving boom that drove the stock market, and that's why they had to come again with something that's more targeted. When you boost outside of that group, you're likely to get increased savings, a greater proportion of foreign source consumption, and or consumption of items with a high import content, which is not going to support growth in Jamaica. Speaking more technically, Madam Speaker, the fiscal multiplier is a term that measures the impact of discretionary fiscal policy on economic output, and it's a ratio of the change in economic output resulting from a particular change in expenditure. And the economic literature has empirical studies on the size of fiscal multipliers in developing and developed countries over long periods of time. And the general findings are that in developing countries like ours, under our structure, stimuli that boost consumption expenditure most times does not have a statistically significant impact on growth of economic output, and sometimes has a negatively distortionary impact for the following conditions and reasons. The more open the economy, it is established around the world in economic literature, the lower the fiscal multiplier under certain conditions. Increased openness is associated with leakage through imports, and that is for very open economies. Consumption-related fiscal stimuli grow other foreign economies as they finance imports from and hence production in those economies. And if trade as a percentage of GDP exceeds a particular threshold, usually estimated at 60%, the fiscal multiplier is actually negative. Now, if you look at our data historically, I believe that you can see that. Meaning, Madam Speaker, that driving consumption weakens growth through the feedback effect of consumer imported related current account deterioration. The PIOJ data shows that for the average openness between 2010 and 2019 of the Jamaican economy was 83%. With that degree of openness, Madam Speaker, fiscal stimuli that goes after consumption has a negative feedback effect because of the feedback effect of the current account deficit. Indebtedness of the country. Empirical data suggests that highly indebted countries generally have lower fiscal multipliers, and fiscal stimulus in high-debt countries tend to negatively impact credibility and confidence on private investment and increases the interest rate risk premium. So it's very firmly established through theoretical and empirical studies that for small, open, highly indebted, non-diversified economies like ours, fiscal multipliers from stimuli that boost consumption expenditure is negligible and often negative. So, Madam Speaker, the literature suggests that boosting stimuli that boost consumption in that way is not a reliable or bankable strategy for economic growth. On the other hand, Madam Speaker, it has been shown, however, unless it is targeted to the populations that are going to use it on domestically produced items, which tend to be the poorest quintiles. Madam Speaker, it has been shown as well that government investment, otherwise known as public investment, has a positive fiscal multiplier in most scenarios. Public investment often has high import content. However, appropriately planned and executed public investment leads to increased capacity and thus translates into higher productivity of existing and new investment. That is, it increases the returns on existing and new investment, which spurs further private investment and hence the multiplier effect. For that reason, a little over half of the Serve Jamaica program is geared towards public investment. Now, Madam Speaker, a practical factor that has to be considered in the Jamaican context is the limited absorptive capacity of the public sector to execute on public investment. We know from experience that we have almost always underperformed on our capital budgets, perhaps meeting it only twice in the last 12 years. And that is with capital budgets growing at a modest clip. One of the reasons for this is the challenge of executing on these projects, bureaucratic delays due to real resource constraints, absence of people, outdated systems, complicated procedures. The exception has been public investments arising from government-to-government cooperation, where these projects are funded and contracted by foreign governments, and where the implementation is largely outside of Jamaica's public bureaucracy. Those have been scalable, but they have other disadvantages as well. Jamaica's naked reality is that the country's current ability in quick time to ramp up public investment and execute on it in a short period of time is neither realistic nor practical. Now, obviously, we don't accept this limitation as permanent, and we continue to work to increase absorption capacity. But I'm telling you today's reality. So it would be nice to imagine that the government could suddenly add $20 billion more of public investment with high domestic value add for the upcoming fiscal year and execute on it. But that would be an exercise in fooling ourselves, particularly under current pandemic conditions. In fact, executing on the $31 billion public investment in the SURF program will likely have implementation challenges. That $8 billion program that the Prime Minister spoke to in detail, has to go on the PIMC schedule and has to be approved, has to go through procurement and so forth. We have to complete procurement and initiate and complete preparatory activities. Given our realities, just talking plain, this is not straightforward. So scaling up public investment on the fly much beyond what we've already done, is not a practical option for Jamaica at this point in time. We have serious capacity constraints. And talk is cheap, Madam Speaker, but we have to confront our reality today. And remember that the largest CapEx achievement so far, nominally, was the $68 billion in 2019-20. And it was almost one of the highest as well as a percentage of GDP. And it included the $8 billion for PATH. If you take out that $8 billion, the highest that we have done is $60 billion, if you're comparing for like. And this year we're programming $52 billion as compared with our peak of $60 billion. And the $52 billion is 20% above what was budgeted for fiscal year 2020-21, which we're going to struggle to meet anyway. So what I say, Madam Speaker, is let us implement the $52 billion that we have first, and then see whether the capacity to absorb more exists. And we're going to push and push and push. Now, we could, don't get me wrong, we could always have public investment where we import some new trucks and new buses as a public investment, but that would not meet the definition of having an immediate fiscal multiplier. And in fact, the foreign exchange outflows at this time would work against us. So given the structure of our economy, Madam Speaker, seeking to boost growth through consumption can have negative impact because of leakage. And we have been there before. Unless it is targeted at where consumption is likely to be domestically weighted. And while public investment has positive multiplier, we are limited by implementation capacity limits of the public bureaucracy. In addition, Madam Speaker, there is the complication of our high debt at 110% of GDP. Countries around the world are often grouped into high income, middle income, and low income. And debt ratios are increased around the world. The United States is at 100%, but I already explained that they're in a completely different category from us. They're robust, they're diverse, they're deep, and they print the reserve currency of the world. So, Madam Speaker, low-income countries have experienced large increases in debt ratios as well, but they stand to benefit from multilateral debt suspension initiatives extended to the poorest countries in the world. Let me be the first to tell you, as I said before, that it's very likely that middle-income countries with high debt ratios are going to have only two options: restructure their debts or make sure they get them down in time. Now, Madam Speaker, it's already happening right here in our CARICOM region, in our hemisphere and in the world. Our CARICOM neighbor, Suriname, had growth rates of 1.7%, 2.6%, 2.5% in 2017, 2018, and 2019, higher than ours in each of those years. Their debt was 75% in 2018, 82% in 2019, prior to COVID, lower than ours. However, Madam Speaker, in 2020, as a result of conditions brought on by the pandemic, Suriname defaulted on its debt and is now engaged in a restructuring with bondholders. From IDB and IMF reports, Suriname's debt went up from 82% to 109% by June 2020, and by November it was at 145%. Inflation, the IMF, I said IDB and IMF reports. Inflation was 4.2%. It is in the national newspapers. Inflation was 4.2% in December 2019, and by August 2020, it was 40%. We have been there, and we know how destructive that is, especially for the poor. And all of that happened just like that, snap, suddenly. So I said the risks are real, my fellow Jamaicans, and it is happening right here in our neighborhood. In the Surinamese case, the channel through which the pressure built was their monetary channel. The crisis exacerbated their current account deficit, and to massive levels, high double digits. Though they have a floating exchange rate, they had their currency, according to reports, at a particular level and presumably used reserves. And once the foreign exchange inflows dwindled, kaboom, they ended up with a one-off devaluation. Now, Suriname may get lucky because they just discovered oil. So they will be all right over time. But for now, they're negotiating a program with the IMF to bail them out. Now, Jamaica's risks are profound, and we need to be mindful given our history of policy relapse. Too much rainfall, has sent our economy sinking. Drought or too little rainfall regularly depresses economic output. Tropical cyclones or hurricanes have flattened the economy in the past. Commodity price volatility, grain, alumina, bauxite, oil have wrecked our economy in recent time. Geopolitical tension and strife, sanctions, all of these actions, Madam Speaker, import volatility into Jamaica, into macroeconomic volatility. And any one of these variables, all of which are outside of our control, could set us back. The point, Madam Speaker, is that if those risks materialize, while we're still burdened with high debt, going into the crisis, you remember Suriname was just 82%, the situation can change more quickly than most realize. And Jamaica's already had 2 debt restructurings in the last decade, which were extremely costly socially and economically. Remember, poverty went up to 24% in 2013. Suriname is not alone either. Ecuador had to restructure, and in January, Reuters reported that Chad officially requested debt restructuring. In February, Zambia requested debt restructuring. And S&P also reported, these are from Reuters news reports, and Reuters also reports that that S&P, the International Credit Rating Agency, expects Ethiopia to follow soon. So far, this common framework for debt restructuring is only open to low-income countries, where they can step in and there's an agreed framework about how the debts are going to be restructured. As time passes, it will not be surprising to see some highly indebted middle-income countries, including some in the Western Hemisphere, come forward to restructure their debts. Now, Madam Speaker, if and when that begins to happen, Jamaica's dynamics have to be far outside of this zone. Or else, what happens is, we'll be seen as a potential candidate. That's how it works. If all of a sudden the dominoes start to drop in our hemisphere by countries that look like us, have similar dynamic ratios to us, then they're going to think we're going to be next. And sometimes those can be self-fulfilling. So, Madam Speaker, I'm doing everything in my power to avoid that potential outcome, as much as we're focusing on ensuring that we invest both in terms of legislation and procedures and capital in recovery. We don't want to be confused with other highly indebted middle-income countries. I'm working to ensure that by then we will have differentiated ourselves by our institutions. And with the opposition, we passed the Bank of Jamaica Amendment Act, which will give us an independent central bank by April 1st. So we want to be differentiated by our institutions, by how we handle the crisis, and by the clarity of our thought and the deliberate nature of our policy making. And for those who say, just move it by a little bit, no man, that not going to trouble nobody. To them I say, remember that it is always only the straw that breaks the camel's back. We need to use our resources wisely. Just today, Prime Minister Andrew Holness's experience, leadership, and vision was again called upon as a leader of a middle-income country that is weathering this crisis well, relative to others. He was locked in meetings today. You saw him turn up a little late, with Prime Minister Trudeau of Canada and with the United Nations Secretary General on crafting global proposals for middle-income countries involving investment and possible accommodations. The world is looking to Jamaica. My fellow Jamaicans, we're in the midst of a dangerous crisis, and there's a lot of uncertainty. And add to all of the vulnerabilities that we mentioned earlier. We may need to spend more as the crisis evolves, but we need to be prepared for what may be around the corner. We don't have infinite resources. We have managed on our own so far in this crisis because of our prudence and our predisposition to always be thinking ahead. You have my word, Madam Speaker, that if the conditions improve and revenue collections improve, we will find additional resources and we will put more money in people's hands in a targeted way to those who need it most. But we cannot count our chickens before they hatch. The crisis is far from over. We have to keep our powder dry and we have to be prudent. We have to balance what we know now in terms of the resources and what we don't know in terms of the evolution of the crisis. We cannot find ourselves out of resources at the wrong time. If we throw out good policy, not knowing where the crisis is headed, we would be taking risks that we cannot afford. So, Madam Speaker, here's how we are approaching it. We're in the midst of this unprecedented, unpredictable, and dangerous global crisis. The budget has been cast in this context and is focused on providing resources to allow us to respond to the crisis, to recover stronger, faster, and better than before. The budget, through the $60 billion Serve Jamaica program, provides resources for us to attain herd immunity this year, support economic recovery with a large infrastructure program that will be challenging to implement, support economic recovery with large allocations of rural farm roads and productivity incentives, help small businesses transition to the digital environment, support vulnerable segments of the population, and provide opportunities for thousands of vulnerable people to be engaged in ways that improve our environment. Madam Speaker, subject to the evolution of the health crisis, we expect job recovery to begin this fiscal year, and furthermore, for job recovery to be kick-started in the next quarter. However, Madam Speaker, it will take several quarters, actually a few years, for the economic and job recovery to restore all that we have lost from the pandemic. What we desire, however, is that the recovery is steady, that it is consistent, and that it happens in a few years, rather than the decade-long time frame of our previous recoveries. Madam Speaker, we'll be piloting the central bank digital currency to bring more Jamaicans into the financial system, and we expect this to spur financial innovation, which will deepen access to finance. And over the medium term, the central bank digital currency will play a significant role in recovering stronger. MSMEs are the backbone of our economy, and we're improving access to finance with $2 billion in this year's budget. We'll end up with 3 equity funds, including one in the gestation period now, focused exclusively on MSMEs, with a total capitalization in the 3 funds of the Jamaican equivalent of between $8 billion and $10 billion, which will be a game changer. Madam Speaker, to recover fast and stronger, agriculture will be important. The pandemic and its impact on imports has provided the opportunity to boost agricultural output and hence allocation to productivity incentives and farm roads that I know Minister Green will judicially employ. Our capital budget includes just under $1 billion to support irrigation of arable lands in Essex Valley and in St. Catherine and in Clarendon, and I'm working with Minister Green from the finance angle on storage solutions as well. The full restoration of lost jobs and economic output will require a reboot of tourism and will not happen in a single fiscal year. It will also depend on the pace of the health and economic recovery. So, Madam Speaker, what we're doing is making the investment in this fiscal year to deepen the tourism product as announced by the Prime Minister. So as tourism arrivals increase again, more dollars and more value add will stay right here in Jamaica. And that is why the Prime Minister announced the expansion of the Montego Bay Freeport Terminal to accommodate larger vessels, the construction of the Artisan Village in Falmouth, the building of a new town centre in Falmouth as well on 50 acres of land using the PPP modality, the reconstruction of the second berth at Reynolds Pier to accommodate larger cruise vessels, and to have a promenade that links the Reynolds Pier to the Ocho Rios fishing village, to the main cruise terminal and to Ocho Rios, and the new museum and other facilities at Port Royal. What this is doing is deepening the tourism product so that we'll have more investment, and when it resumes, we'll be able to take more out of it. With the amendment of the Casino Gaming Act, we will, Madam Speaker, Jamaica could possibly receive investment of over $2 billion US in aggregate, due to the eagerness of casino gaming resorts to invest in Jamaica. They're knocking on our door every month, Madam Speaker, even in the pandemic. This week, tomorrow. And we're having to assure them that we'll soon have the law passed and the RFP launched. So, Madam Speaker, we're pursuing a private sector investment approach. The Prime Minister has spoken about the Cayman Special Economic Zone and confirmed the interest of international investors to invest tens of billions of Jamaican dollars in this project. And we're working to repeal and replace the Customs Act, bringing in modern procedures that will facilitate the leveraging of our airport and airport assets, along with our hardworking people, to play a larger role in the global supply chain. These productivity incentive changes will unleash investment and jobs across the medium term. Madam Speaker, we're investing in infrastructure to improve our productivity of new and existing investments, which will support durable growth. The South Coast project is already interesting developers to bring significant housing investment to St. Thomas. And as Prime Minister Holness mentioned before, not this budget, but in a previous speech, the Montego Bay Perimeter project with the extension of the road from Montpelier to Holland Bamboo and the completion of the complete vision of the South Coast Improvement Project will see goods and people be transported from Kingston to Montego Bay eventually on a 4-lane highway non-stop. And you know what I call that? All right. Madam Speaker, we're also likely to achieve this. We're also likely to achieve this by expansion of the Mobay to Ocherius for 4-lane connection between Kingston and Mobay to be a reality. Madam Speaker, these are possible across the medium term, and that will increase the productivity of investment and usher in new investment too. You cannot imagine the transformative impact of connecting Jamaica's 2 major cities by direct and efficient 4-lane highway, of connecting Jamaica's 2 international airports by direct and efficient 4-lane highway, by conducting Jamaica's 2 major seaports by direct and efficient 4-lane highway. This will make all kinds of economic activity more productive, and ideas that may not have been feasible before will become feasible with this transformation. This is all scheduled to be completed within the medium term, Madam Speaker, and will likely boost our recovery efforts. Madam Speaker, where the GOJ has absorption capacity, where we don't have absorption capacity, we'll organize for the private sector to step in. In 2019, the World Bank had a ranking where Jamaica was ranked number 4 in Latin America for PPPs, and number 5 in Latin America and the Caribbean for our investment and business climate for PPPs. And we were ranked number 1 in Latin America and Caribbean for the maturity of our PPP environment. We will leverage our earned reputation for successful PPP implementation to mobilize international and domestic capital for investment in water, in sewage, in healthcare in Jamaica. Minister Tufton has spoken about the multi-billion-dollar centers of excellence in nephrology and oncology, which will be realized by the PPP modality. The Prime Minister has spoken about the expansion in water, which will also be realized by several PPP projects. And as the Prime Minister has announced, we are working towards having the highway projects beyond the South Coast Highway and the Montego Bay Perimeter Road projects being conducted by open competitive modality with the assistance of the World Bank. And ideally, some of these will be by PPP modality too. And there's more to come. We'll be finalizing our large-scale and pioneer industry investment regime that will put us in a position to attract major US billion-dollar investments. In targeting a robust recovery, Madam Speaker, recognizing the constraints of government, the government of Jamaica is working to mobilize hundreds of billions of Jamaican dollars of international and domestic capital for investment in Jamaica across the medium term, across the areas I highlighted previously and beyond. And this will fuel and sustain our economic recovery, and we will recover stronger, faster, and better. Ultimately, the government of Jamaica is deliberately and consciously pursuing a private sector-led economic recovery. And while the government will invest to the fullest extent of its capacity, we will reap far more investment, multiples of what the government could possibly do, from the international and local private sector over the medium term if we invest in the productivity-enhancing spaces through public investment. This, together, has the potential to transform Jamaica. In concluding, Madam Speaker, policy matters. and good policy matters more. The opposition says people should be at the center of good policy. But of course, Madam Speaker, who benefited from the good policy that yielded $90 billion of cash resources last year? Nearly 500,000 people. Who is benefiting from the good policy that yielded the $30 billion of dividend resources this year? Let me tell you, 15,000 taxi drivers, which is 15,000 people. 5,000 contract carriage operators, which is 5,000 people. Over 50,000 unemployed, which is 50,000 people. We expect more than 100,000 seniors, which is 100,000 people. Madam Speaker, there'll be an additional 17,000 devices through the CDF and through councillors. That's 17,000 people. The farmers who will receive the productivity incentives are people. The thousands who will find jobs through infrastructure construction, Madam Speaker, and the thousands with temporary employment through the Paint the City and river training activities are people. Madam Speaker, the 2 million people vaccinated, to be vaccinated this year, of which 24,000 have already been vaccinated up to 2 days ago, are benefited from the good policy, and that is people, Madam Speaker. So it is people who benefit from good policy, and that is why we pursue good policy. Madam Speaker, on this side, improving the lives and the lived experience of the Jamaican people is our mandate and focus. The COVID-19 pandemic has interrupted our progress, but with good policy, we will recover faster, better, and stronger than before. And against the background of 16 years of heavy tax increases prior to 2016, every single year, except for one, between 2000 and 2015-16, where tax increases total over $100 billion in nominal terms between 2000 and 2016, where in terms of GDP, tax increases total 14% of GDP between 2000 and 2016. Madam Speaker, tax increases average 0.87% of GDP every single year for the 16 years between 2000 and 2016. Think about that. It is because of that background, Madam Speaker, we are particularly pleased that for the 6th consecutive year now, the budget has no new net taxes. We are particularly pleased, Madam Speaker, that for the 4th consecutive year now, the budget has no new taxes. And Madam Speaker, we are particularly pleased that for the 3rd consecutive year now, the budget has some tax or fee that we have put into the rubbish bin of history by abolishing it. 3 years in a row. And this is so even in the middle of the pandemic. My fellow Jamaicans, we have agency as an independent people. We can create the future we want to see. We can fulfill our destiny as a people. And with God's help, we can pursue good policy that benefits the people, that will allow Jamaica to recover faster, better, and stronger than before. God bless you, and God bless Jamaica.
Madam Speaker.